It took me a full 7 years to finally make up my mind that I was going to propose to Damari. However, on the day of the proposal, I never expected that he would brave the storm and go to meet another girl. And that girl had confessed her love to him thousands of times before but was always rejected. When the news of Avani's family going bankrupt came, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I couldn't wait to share this good news with my boyfriend. But when I opened the door of the office, I saw him sitting in front of the computer with a look of impatience on his face. He seemed to be thinking about something and didn't even notice when I came in. It was only when I walked up behind him that he reacted and hurriedly closed the web page on the computer. But I saw the title of the page at a glance, Zhongxin Company's bankruptcy. What's next for Nicholas? Nicholas is Avani's father and he had brought us countless troubles in the past. I said with a smile, so you already know. Do you want to go celebrate tonight? But he gave me a strange look, hesitated for a moment, and then asked, are you happy that their family has fallen? I was puzzled for a moment and couldn't help but ask him in return, what? Aren't you happy that their family has fallen? Damari smiled and said, yes, I'm very happy. But the veins on the hand that was holding his mobile phone were bulging. I sensed that something was wrong with him and wanted to ask him what was going on. But just a second before I opened my mouth, the ringtone of his mobile phone suddenly rang. Damari seemed to be startled and subconsciously threw his hand. The newly bought mobile phone was dropped on the floor by him, vibrating and playing the incoming call music. And on the call interface, 2 words were displayed, Avani Damari. I called his name and asked, are you going to answer her call? Damari looked at me hesitantly and finally answered the call. A familiar, delicate crying sound came from the other end that I closed my eyes. Avani, Nicholas's daughter, the pampered young lady whose family had just gone bankrupt today, was a persistent person who had liked Damari for 7 years. She had also been a shadow over me for a full 7 years. Damari and I had a lot to do with the Zhong family. This connection could be traced back to our college days. Damari and I met in college. At that time, Damari was the president of the student union and I was the head of the art department. It was almost natural for the two of us to be together. Besides each other, we couldn't think of anyone else who could be a match for us. Our circles of friends and social connections almost completely overlapped, and we were known as the golden couple on campus, probably because we made our relationship public early. Few people with other intentions took the initiative to approach us. After all, our names always appeared together. If someone asked about my name, our common friends would always say, oh, you're asking about Paula. She's Damari's girlfriend. If someone asked about Damari, there would always be someone saying, you're asking about Damari. He's Paula's boyfriend. Even if someone who didn't know better came up to us, seeing how close we were, they would start to back off. But Avani was an exception. Avani suddenly appeared beside Damari. According to her, Damari had saved her life. She also secretly fell in love with Damari, so she wanted to be with Damari. Damari said, lady, I already have a girlfriend. Avani then said, it's okay. I'll wait for you to break up with her. Avani was good looking, but her academic performance was not good. Her family had used a lot of means to get her into our school. It was said that her family's power and influence were at a level that we couldn't reach. So, I was also very curious about what Damari could have done to save the life of such a wealthy young lady. I first met Avani on an ordinary Friday afternoon. No matter how much Damari refused Avani, it was useless. Helplessly, he had to let me meet her. During that meeting, Damari peeled shrimps for me all the time, and the two of us were more affectionate than ever before. But unexpectedly, even so, Avani didn't show the slightest intention to back off. Instead, when Damari went to pay the bill, she officially declared war on me. Sister, do you believe it? Damari will be my man sooner or later. How did I respond to her at that time? I put the knife and fork on the plate and smiled gently at her. Little sister, I've never stopped Damari from liking others. Yes, I've never stopped Damari from liking others. Damari and I were attracted to each other at a spiritual level. That's why we could remain as firm as we were at the beginning for a full 7 years despite countless obstacles. Now that the Nicholas family had fallen, we finally had a chance to catch our breath. Avani, who couldn't get what she wanted, was almost like a madwoman. Avani was a madwoman and her father, Mr. Nicholas, was a doting father who spoiled his daughter to the extreme. It wasn't that obvious when we were at school. It was only after Damari and I graduated that we realized what real power and influence were. Damari was talented and unwilling to work under others, so he planned to start his own business as soon as he entered society. But he failed many times. At first, I thought it was because we didn't do something well, until one time, Damari and I stopped the client at their doorstep. We begged them again and again, hoping to get an order. The client said with difficulty, "It's not that I don't want to cooperate with you. Think about it. Who did you offend?" Damari and I had just graduated and had pitifully few social connections. How could we have offended anyone? So, we had to spend the whole night sorting out the people we had met since we started our company, for fear that we might have overlooked something and offended someone. You know, with just a word from others, they could cut off many of our contracts. I didn't expect that the big shot that we couldn't find even after searching all night would actually come forward to reveal their identity on their own. The next day when we went to work, Avani was waiting at the entrance of our company. "Damari, do you see how difficult it is to start a company?" she said, "but as long as you're willing to be my boyfriend, whether you want to enter my family's enterprise or start your own business, it will be as easy as lifting a finger for you." That day, Damari was furious. The company was his painstaking effort. It was the result of the hard work of Damari, me, and many others. It had just taken shape and was on the verge of collapse. Avani was like a child playing with building blocks. Maliciously, she gave it a gentle push. Damari stepped forward, wanting to push Avani. But I held him back. "You're not in college anymore. You have to endure it." Behind Avani was Nicholas, a person we couldn't afford to offend. Damari and I put in dozens or even hundreds of times more effort, hoping to get corresponding rewards. But every time our company was about to succeed, it was easily pushed down by Avani. Nicholas spoiled his daughter and would occasionally put pressure on Damari. At the most embarrassing time, Damari and I were staying in a rented apartment, having a hard time even getting enough to eat. I asked him, "Why don't you just agree to Avani and marry into the Nicholas family?" Damari got angry that he hadn't even dried his hands after washing my feet before he came to pinch my nose. "What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Say it again?" Damari said, "Paula, for you, I can give up my career." Actually, it wasn't just us who were having a hard time at that time. Avani's pain was no less than ours. She was the eldest daughter of the richest man in Highshire, and she was quite good looking. It was rare for her to fall in love with someone, but that person already had someone in his heart. She couldn't win the person she liked over. Everyone knew that Avani used to send lunch boxes to Damari's company every day in order to pursue him. She stood downstairs of our rented apartment and called Damari's name. She sneaked into Damari's team-building activities and flew a kite with Damari's name on it. Her love was so passionate and bold that everyone in the city knew about it. At the time when she was in the most pain, she waited downstairs of our rented apartment all night. It was pouring rain. I couldn't hold on any longer and finally persuaded Damari to go downstairs with me. Damari. When she saw Damari and I coming one after the other, her originally bright eyes dimmed again. "Please give me a response. My father asked me to go on a blind date. If you don't respond to me, I won't be able to chase you anymore." Damari handed her an umbrella and said, "Stop chasing me. I don't like you." Avani didn't keep her word either. She said that she might not be able to like Damari anymore soon. But then, suddenly, she got some kind of strength from somewhere and kept chasing Damari without giving up. Damari didn't like Avani. The only person Damari liked was Paula. I have to say that although I was bothered by Avani's persistent pursuit at that time, I was indeed a bit proud of Damari's loyalty. Damari hung up Avani's phone. He leaned back in the boss chair and closed his eyes. Such a big enterprise. Damari said slowly, it just went bankrupt like this. I understood his sense of disbelief. After all, the Zhongxin Group was like a big hand that could control Haicheng. With just a move of its hand, it could crush dozens or even hundreds of small enterprises like ours. Watching it host banquets and then watching it collapse. The shock of it couldn't be explained clearly in just a few words. It's time to celebrate properly. Damari smiled and said, let's go to your favorite restaurant for dinner tonight. Okay. That restaurant wasn't a high-end one, but it had accompanied Damari and me through the most difficult times and had a special meaning for us. We liked to go to that restaurant to celebrate whenever we had the chance. When we sat down, I couldn't help rubbing the small box in my pocket. Inside it were 2 plain ring bands that I had chosen long ago. In the past, when Damari and I were in a relationship, he was always the one taking the initiative. Today, I also wanted to take the initiative for once. But Damari's state today was very strange. Especially after it rained. He would be in a daze from time to time and was often absent-minded. Sometimes I had to repeat what I said to him twice. And when we sat down to eat, although he was eating, he looked like he was ready to leave at any time. This look made me stop the action of taking out the ring. Damari? I asked him, do you have something on your mind? No. He seemed to be suddenly awakened. No. Before he could finish speaking, his phone suddenly rang. Hello. The phone seemed like a life-saving straw to him. He quickly answered it, then nervously glanced at me and ran to the door to talk on the phone. I reached into my pocket and tightly grasped the ring box. After just thinking for a moment with my head down, I saw that Damari had already finished the call. He rushed back like a gust of wind, frowning, speaking softly and quickly, Avani is in trouble. Something happened to Avani? I asked Damari, what's it got to do with you? Huh? Damari didn't hear clearly. Or rather, he deliberately didn't want to hear clearly. It's a pity that there's no mirror now, so Damari couldn't see the undisguisable anxiety on his face. He was worried about Avani, so worried that he couldn't even hear what I said clearly. But he still kept explaining, Avani. Avani cut her wrists. She's now in the hospital being rescued. The doctor called me. I interrupted him again, are you going to see her? Then Damari fell silent. After a moment, he said, would you like to accompany me to see her? Our date came to an end. The landlady smiled and said, I won't serve the rest of the dishes for you now. I'll make them up for you next time when you come. I also smiled and said, we'll see. Damari was too preoccupied to say anything. His mind was elsewhere and he seemed as if he was about to rush out at any moment. When we hurriedly arrived at the hospital, Damari's worry became even more obvious. Paula, he handed me a card, Avani's family has no money at all now. Go and pay the fees for her first. I'll go and see her. I originally thought that Avani might still be on the operating table being rescued. After all, Damari was so anxious, as if his wife was dying. However, I didn't expect that after I paid the fees, I learned that Avani had already been sent to the ward. The cuts she made weren't deep, and she called the ambulance in time. I walked slowly to the ward. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Avani lying on the bed. Damari stood in front of her hospital bed with a gloomy face and said, you should have a limit to your willfulness. Don't take your own life so lightly. And Avani saw me. The girl, who was originally pale, seemed to be like a spring suddenly installed in her body and threw herself into Damari's arms. Damari, please. You're the only one I have left in this world. I was speechless. Girl, that's not right. Isn't your father still waiting for you in prison? At the very least, your mother is still at home. How could Damari be the only one left? I watched coldly without saying a word. Until Damari couldn't help but put his hand on Avani's head. Damari, I couldn't help but call out to him. Damari seemed to be pricked by a hedgehog, but he was still gentle and didn't dare to push her away forcefully. However, the words he said still seemed to be sharp as knives. Avani, if you don't love yourself, no one will love you. No matter how many times it is, I have to tell you that I will never, ever like you. Avani's face turned pale, but I saw Damari's fingers clenched until they turned white. The body's reactions don't lie. I sighed. But Damari had already taken my hand. Now that your family has fallen, we don't have to be afraid of your father causing trouble anymore. I will marry Paula. I hope you give up and continue with your life. Damari's words made Avani cry. Damari, my father advised me so many times, but I still insisted on liking you. My family is gone, and I'm still thinking about you. How could you do this? How could you? Damari tightened his grip on my hand. Paula and I have loved each other for 7 years. You're the only one who's so unreasonable and wants to interfere. How could you? After confirming that I had paid the fees for Avani, Damari took me and left the hospital. I'll hire a caregiver for you. It's the last bit of friendship we have as classmates. Before leaving, Avani quietly leaned against the hospital bed and suddenly started to say harsh words. Damari, you will like me. You've been treating me better and better. Damari said that he and I had been in love for 7 years and that others couldn't interfere easily. But now, lying on the bed, I actually felt that the 7 years of being in love he mentioned might be an illusion. Were Damari and I really that much in love? If we were really that much in love, then why was Damari so distracted when he was with me? Why did he receive 4 or 5 calls from the caregiver in one night? And why, when he came back, he subconsciously put his hand into my pocket to warm himself up? But when his fingertips touched the jewelry box I hid in the pocket of my coat, he withdrew his hand as if he had been electrocuted. I woke up in the middle of the night and there was no one beside the bed. When I sleepily went to look for him, I saw the light on in the study. It was Damari. He was on the phone. It wasn't with Avani, but with Avani's caregiver. How is she now? Is she still not eating? Have you tried seafood porridge? She loves seafood very much. Let the porridge cool down a bit before feeding it to her. Don't burn her. Those instructions were detailed and thorough. Only then did I know that Avani liked seafood. So Damari could also take care of people like this. Damari was in a very bad mood today. After hanging up the phone, he rubbed his brow hard. I waited for him at the door for a long time, but he didn't get up. Until I couldn't wait any longer and went back to the bedroom by myself. When I woke up the next day, there was still no one beside the bed. When I came out of the bedroom, I saw the door suddenly being opened. Damari walked in from outside, carrying a bag of small steamed buns in his hand and 2 cups of soy milk. Seeing that I was pouring water, he was stunned for a moment. You're up so early? Here, I just finished my morning run and bought you some buns on the way. My action of pouring water stopped. Finally, I couldn't bear it and couldn't help asking, Damari, do you go for a morning run, still wearing a suit? Damari isn't a stupid person. He's always been meticulous in doing things and seldom makes mistakes in social interactions. Making such a mistake could only mean that his mind was full of other things. Probably his mind was full of Avani. Thinking like this, I also asked aloud, did you go to see Avani this morning? He visibly panicked. What are you talking about? Paula, I. He couldn't say what he thought about her anymore. It's okay, I closed my eyes. Damari, you paid her hospital fees and found a caregiver for her. Can you promise me that you won't see her again? You've already done enough for her. Damari probably had never seen me so calm before, so he couldn't wait to say, I promise you. I'll never see her again. He promised too quickly. I told Damari, there won't be a next time. Damari agreed. Indeed, he could also sense that his excessive concern for Avani was inappropriate. So the moment I reminded him, he could also realize that he had gone too far. Or rather, from the very beginning, he had been struggling with himself, trying to resist having feelings for Avani. Damari had wavered a little in our relationship. I knew it clearly and was truly heartbroken, but I still didn't want to give up Damari, so I gave him the reminder. If he wavered a little, I just needed to discover it in time and pull him back. I couldn't break up with him just because his mind was a little bit distracted from me. After all, we used to be so close. But, Damari, if you don't love me anymore, there's no point in me being with you. I said to him, there won't be a next time. The nature will be different next time. Next time, it won't be just a simple hesitation in feelings. Damari should have understood. He put the things on the table and walked up to me, gently hugging me. Paula, I'm sorry. I don't like her. Damari was actively correcting himself. After saying that he wouldn't go to see Avani again, he really didn't go to the hospital anymore. He also paid the caregiver for 10 days in one go. As for the caregiver's calls, he didn't answer them anymore. He even daydreamed a lot less. Every day he was full of energy. When he got up in the morning, he was full of enthusiasm and ready for new work. I seemed to see the Damari who was still a student before. Cheerful, confident, sunny, and positive, our company was able to survive under Nicholas's suppression before. Now that Nicholas has fallen on hard times, it's getting better and more stable. Everyone in the whole company was full of enthusiasm. And Damari had the air of a rising star in the business world. On this day, Damari managed to sign a contract that had been in negotiation for a long time. So he decided to take the whole company to the barbecue park for a team-building activity on Wednesday when there weren't many people, and he quietly said to me among the cheers of colleagues, "Paula, I'll give you a big surprise then." How funny. What kind of surprise is it if you say it in advance? I didn't expect that Damari really gave me a big surprise. On the day of the team building, I needed to confirm a document, so I asked Damari to go first, and I would take a taxi to find them later. However, when I arrived at the barbecue park, I saw an old acquaintance, Avani. She was sitting among a group of colleagues. Everyone was too polite to drive her away, but most of them knew the entanglement between her and us, so they felt uncomfortable staying there. And Damari stood there with a dark face. Seeing me coming, he quickly came up to meet me. "Paula, I don't know." He didn't know why Avani had suddenly come. But Avani had always been like a piece of chewing gum. If she suddenly let go and stopped pestering Damari, it would be abnormal. This time, Avani seemed to have suddenly had an epiphany. She didn't wear luxury clothes anymore, and she didn't have that arrogant look anymore. She didn't even take the initiative to get close to Damari's position. She wore a beige coat, with no makeup on, and her face was pale. She was like a little white flower trembling in the cold wind. What should I do now? Drive her away? Or hold Damari's arm to assert my sovereignty? Or directly and smugly tell her, "Your father is finished. You have nothing to compete with me for"? These were undoubtedly all bad options. What I should do was to gracefully take Damari's arm and then tell everyone to enjoy the food and drink, act as if Avani didn't exist, ignore her, and then coyly receive the surprise that Damari promised to give me. But I found that I couldn't bear it, facing the arrogant Avani who blatantly said she would snatch my boyfriend away. I could still endure it. But facing Avani who was like a little white flower and looked at me timidly, I couldn't bear it, because I knew that when facing the arrogant Avani, Damari would only be angry with her and then strengthen his love for me, and his heart would never waver again. But when facing Avani who was like a little white flower, Damari would easily feel pity, which was not far from love. So, for the first time, I threw away the grace of being a company partner and the future landlady. I smiled at Damari and said, "Since you don't know how she got here, why don't you just let her leave now?" Damari frowned. Yes. He had always been such a person. Before, Avani had been aggressively chasing after him, so he avoided her like the plague, and our relationship grew deeper. Now that Avani was in a miserable situation, he felt pity for her and thought that I was deliberately making things difficult for her. "She's already here," Damari said softly. "It's not necessary, is it?" Damari thought that there was no need for me to be harsh on Avani. But he didn't know, didn't he? Didn't he know why Avani had come here? He could reject her before, so why couldn't he do it now? I sneered and said, "Fine, if you say there's no need, then there's no need." Most of the people present didn't like Avani, so even if she stayed here, she wouldn't feel at ease. Instead, she would only feel lonely. Avani's expression became gloomier and gloomier, and Damari couldn't help looking at her several times out of control. The girl from the finance department gently patted my arm and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong?" I didn't say a word. The girl from the finance department then whispered to me, you should keep an eye on President Damari. You've finally got together, don't let others steal him away. Yes, everyone in the whole company could sense something was going on. They could tell that in the past, every time Avani joined our team building group, she shouted loudly and expressed her love several times, but Damari didn't even give her a glance. They could also tell that this time, she sat quietly without saying a word, yet Damari looked at her again and again. I took a sip of wine and replied in a low voice, "Whatever. If it's not meant for me, I can't get it back. If it's mine, no one can take it away by flirting." The girl from the finance department's face changed. "Well, you can't say that." The climax of the whole team building event turned out to be when others talked about the Nicholas family. Now that the Nicholas family had fallen on hard times, when people talked about the Nicholas family, they no longer had to consider Avani's feelings, especially since the Nicholas family had given our company a lot of trouble before. Everyone in the company had been holding a grudge. So everyone talked about how the Nicholas family deserved what they got. They also lamented how the Nicholas family's business had collapsed and how many innocent employees had lost their jobs as a result. As they talked, they started to talk about the bad things that Avani and the Nicholas family had done in order to get Damari and Avani together. Avani, who had been silent all along, suddenly stood up. Her eyelids were thin and red, and upon closer inspection, they were a bit swollen. She pursed her lips tightly, raised her wineglass high, and in the blink of an eye, big teardrops rolled down her cheeks. "Paula," she called my name. "I'm sorry. I was so thoughtless before and hurt you and brother Damari. Later, my father was arrested, and I had to struggle on my own outside. I had to support myself and my mother, and only then did I realize how difficult it was. I didn't know if she was really apologizing to me. Until she downed the whole glass of wine in one gulp. Avani." Damari suddenly shouted her name out of control. Then he took 3 steps forward and snatched the glass from her hand. "You're allergic to alcohol. Don't you know that?" I asked Damari. "How do you know she's allergic to alcohol?" Indeed, I had never seen Avani drink. She had been pestering Damari for so long, but I had never seen her pick up a wine glass. Only this time, she was sitting among the employees at the team building event, holding a glass of wine and taking small sips from time to time. I had noticed that her eyelids were red, but I thought it was because she had cried before coming here. I never thought that it was because of an alcohol allergy. Damari refused to answer my question. Because as soon as Damari snatched Avani's wine glass, she started to fall to one side, and Damari, almost instinctively, pulled Avani into his arms. I asked again, "Damari, how do you know she likes seafood? And how do you know she's allergic to alcohol?" Damari pursed his lips tightly. With one hand, he held her waist tightly, and with the other hand, he rummaged in his pocket for the car keys. They were extremely intimate, just like the time in the hospital when she hugged him tightly. However, at that time, he still resisted and struggled. At this time, his face was full of worry, and the colleagues around could clearly see what was going on. How much like a pair of lovebirds beaten by a stick. I had told Damari before that there wouldn't be a next time. I should have given up hope. But I still couldn't resign myself to it and asked, "Damari, didn't you say you had a surprise for me?" Damari found the car keys but paused for a moment. "Paula. Is the surprise in the car, right?" I asked him. Why this time? The colleagues had already noticed that something was wrong and gathered around. Especially those who had witnessed Avani's alcohol allergy rushed to the front of us. Don't worry, President Damari. You stay here with President Paula first, and we'll send Miss Zhong to the hospital. Damari couldn't vent his anger on me, and finally, someone bumped into his line of fire. How can I not worry? She's having an allergic reaction. His voice wasn't low at all. The colleague who had come to persuade him out of kindness was stunned on the spot. Sorry. Damari said. The colleague was also good-tempered and then said softly, "I'm also worried, so I'll drive her there quickly. I haven't drunk, so I can drive." Damari hesitated for a moment. But at this moment, Avani coughed and said, "Damari, I want you to take me to the hospital. Damari, you're the only one I have left." The girl was in tears, which was really pitiful. I watched helplessly as the colleague put down his hand that was about to help, and watched as Damari's gaze became firm. Paula, come with me to the hospital. I couldn't help but laugh. Why bother? At this point, he still wanted me to go with him to send Avani to the hospital. What was he trying to cover up? So I smiled and said, hurry up and go. An allergic reaction is no small matter. I have to deal with company affairs and won't go. Damari really listened to me and carried Avani towards the parking area. The girl from the operations department had an expression of unable to bear watching. She couldn't help but call out to Damari, President Damari, didn't you say there was a surprise for President Paula to see? Yes. But Damari had been held up again and again and was already very anxious. So he turned his head and said to me seriously, Paula, wait for me to come back, and I'll give you a surprise. I said, okay, I'll wait for you. He felt relieved and carried Avani away. He probably really thought that I would wait for him. After all, it had been like that before. After graduation, he and I had supported each other. We were lovers, sweethearts, and people who had shared hardships. Together, we had built a small dream into a skyscraper. We had also been drunk countless times at business dinners just to secure an investment. I had accompanied him through his most frustrated times. I had also accompanied him to celebrate every happy moment. Because I had been with him for so long, he thought that it was only natural for me to wait there for him. After Damari carried Avani away, the girl from the operations department came up to me hesitantly. President Paula, don't be angry with President Damari. He really prepared a surprise for you. I didn't know if the surprise he prepared for me was really a surprise or not. But Avani's appearance at the team building event was quite a big surprise. The girl from the operations department probably also saw that I had given up hope on Damari, and she gestured and explained to me, President Damari wanted to propose to you today. He asked me for advice and prepared a trunk full of flowers and balloons. All you had to do was open it. Where are the flowers? I asked her. The girl from the operations department was stunned. They were taken away by Damari, right? I smiled. And he took Avani with him too. The girl from the operations department didn't say anything. For the first time, I left the mess that Damari had left for me behind. You guys have fun. I'm going back for a while. I have something to do. Before I left, that junior colleague called out to me, Senior, talk to Senior Damari properly. Don't quarrel. Okay. I really did have something to do, but it wasn't to rush to the hospital to get Damari back. Instead, I was hurrying back to the place where we lived to pack my things. Damari and I had been living together since graduation. From the basement at the beginning to the large flat now, along the way, there were too many things in our home that belonged to me. I couldn't sort them out in a short time. So I just took all my important documents, as well as my toiletries and a change of clothes. I sent a message to the HR manager and asked for leave. I want to take all the leave I had accumulated before at once. Before we had been working hard to start our business. The employees took breaks but Damari and I didn't. Now counting it up, my accumulated leave was almost enough for 2 months. The HR manager said he understood. It was just that the boss and the boss's wife were having a conflict. President Paula, you can take a break whenever you want and for as long as you want. I said, and took out my phone to book a plane ticket. By the way, President Paula. The HR manager suddenly called out to me as I was about to hang up the phone. Well? President Damari said that he wanted me to arrange a position for Avani. I smiled and said, it's okay. You can arrange it. You don't need to ask for my opinion in the future. I applied for an expedited visa. When Damari called me, I was already on my way to the airport. Paula, where are you? I didn't answer him. He then started talking on his own on the other end of the phone. I've sent Avani to the hospital. I hired the same caregiver as before. She looked really scary when she had the allergic reaction just now, but I won't contact her again in the future. I interrupted him, Damari, you're also afraid that I'll be angry, right? That's why you're so eager to explain to me. But, knowing clearly that I'll be angry and feel hurt. Knowing clearly that I've told you not to do it again. Why do you still do some things? Do you think I'll tolerate you infinitely? Damari was silent. After a long while, a voice came from the other end of the phone. He asked carefully, Paula, I said before that I had prepared a surprise for you. Do you want to see it? I'll come to find you right now. No need to find me, I said. Damari, I don't need surprises anymore. Those preparations couldn't be called surprises anymore. A surprise should be something carefully prepared that makes me excited and happy when I see it. It should be something that makes my eyes fill with tears and my heart flutter. It's not an apology after you've done something wrong, Paula? There was the sound of him opening the door on the other end of the phone. He had probably gone home and then rushed into our room. You see, I knew him very well. When there is no one else on his mind, he was quite smart that he knew to check the drawers first to see if my important documents were there and then to look for my personal clothes to see if any were missing. He asked me again, Paula? Where have you gone? Damari, I said. Let's break up. Damari learned from the HR department that I had asked for leave. He was quite smart. Combining the ambient sounds he had heard when we were on the phone, he knew that I was already on my way to the airport. Paula, he called me on the phone. Wait for me, please wait for me. I can explain. He couldn't wait to hold on to something. I heard a loud engine noise from his end with my own ears. Paula, listen to me. Don't board the plane yet. Let's solve whatever the problem is right now. You see, he knew it too. Don't leave misunderstandings behind. Solve whatever issues there are right away. Otherwise, those misunderstandings will never be cleared up for a lifetime and some people will be missed forever. But why, when it came to him, did he pretend not to understand? Damari, do you think that I'm going on a trip to avoid this matter? Do you think that if you don't solve this with me face to face and let me leave, there will be no chance to win me back? Damari didn't say anything. Perhaps he was concentrating on driving. Perhaps I had hit the nail on the head about what was on his mind. I advised him, don't rush. Drive slowly. Now I've already entered the boarding gate. Damari, even if you fly here, you won't be able to stop me. A shrill breaking sound came. Damari's voice was hoarse and pained. Paula, you can't do this to me. How can you be so cruel to me? Why can't I do this to you? I asked him. Damari, I'm not running away at all. Because I've already made a decision. I want to break up with you. I can do this to you because I don't like you anymore. I don't know if Damari came to the airport that day. But anyway, I won't wait there for his choice like I used to. Where did I go? Of course, I went to spend my 2-month vacation traveling around to relax and experiencing the local customs and cultures of different countries. It didn't matter where I went. It was better than wasting my prime youth on the entanglement between Damari and Avani. I watched handsome guys with blonde hair and blue eyes in European bars. I watched all kinds of good-looking young men in big shorts on the beach. I bought a lot of souvenirs and sent them back like flowing water. It was the first time that I experienced the joy of spending money like water. Before, neither Damari nor I came from wealthy families. We started our business right after graduation and didn't have much money left. To save money, not to mention living in a basement, it was quite common for the two of us to eat steamed buns with pickles. Later, our situation got a bit better. I thought that we would eventually get married. If we got married, we needed to have a house. So I asked Damari to save his money, and I also saved my salary and my bank card one by one, hoping that we could have a house of our own in Highshire. Until our company grew better and better, Damari had enough money to buy a large flat. I had also developed a thrifty habit and was reluctant to spend money randomly. But now I realized how wonderful it was to spend money. I played abroad for a whole month and a half. It was not until my vacation was almost over that I started to book the return tickets. During that time, my WeChat kept ringing. The people who contacted me included Damari and others. Damari was trying to explain to me that he had nothing to do with Avani. And the others were Damari's lobbyists. They were always trying to persuade me that Damari and I had been together for 7 years and it would be a pity to break up. When they talked about those 7 years, they seemed to know them better than I did and were more sincere than I was. They said how Damari had persisted in being with me during those 7 years and how well known Damari's love for me was during that time. Finally, they asked me, "Don't you remember those past days?" Of course I remembered. If Damari hadn't been so nice during those 7 years, I could have convinced myself. But he had been consistent in his feelings for me for 7 years. Having been cherished by him for 7 years, how could I accept his being half-hearted? I never blocked Damari's contact information. I would read his explanations but didn't answer his calls. If there was something about the company, I would contact him directly via WeChat messages. Even after returning to China, I didn't go back to Haishur. Instead, I went straight back to my hometown. Before coming back, I had informed my parents in advance. So just as I walked to the door of my house, I smelled the aroma of braised pork, which my father was best at cooking. Of course, I also saw Damari, who had been waiting at the door for a long time. I was about to pull my suitcase and walk into the yard. But unexpectedly, he grabbed my arm. "Paula, at least give me a chance to explain," Damari called me. "Okay?" I didn't want to quarrel with him in front of my parents. So although my parents knew that I had broken up with him, I still took him into the house and invited him to have a meal. For the sake of our being classmates before, I smiled. "If you have something to say, just say it." That was the first time I heard Damari analyze himself. He said that he seemed to be possessed. He said that he was sure that he had hated Avani before. And even now, he hadn't fallen for Avani. It's just that he had been pursued so passionately by Avani before. He had witnessed the savage, innocent yet cruel young girl. And then he saw her fall from a high position to an ordinary one. "I just couldn't bear it," he said. "Her father has gone to prison. Can't we show her a little sympathy?" He said, "Can't you stop having so much hostility towards her? Paula, you're also a girl. You know it's not easy for her." At this moment, my heart died completely. Suddenly, I realized that from the moment I saw Damari's affection for Avani until now, I had never shed a single tear for him. "Let me tell you why I can't tolerate her," I said softly. "Because you've fallen for her. You keep saying that you just couldn't bear it. But when she waited for you in the pouring rain, when she flew the kite with your name written on it into the sky, when she went to your company to look for you time and time again, you kept saying you were rejecting her, but you were falling for her every time. When she cut her wrist, you were so distracted. When she had an allergic reaction, you didn't trust others to take care of her. Damari, do you know under what kind of relationship you won't trust others to take care of a girl?" Of course, there were times when Damari didn't trust others to take care of me either. Once, Damari and I invited a representative of a client to have dinner. The other person liked drinking and also liked to watch others drink. Even though I said that I couldn't drink much, he didn't let me go. I got drunk first and lay on the table. Damari's assistant came over and wanted to take me away. But Damari stopped him. "Go and open another private room and put her in the next one. I won't feel at ease if she easily leaves my sight." But later, he didn't feel at ease when others left his sight instead. Damari still wanted to deny it. "I heard it," I said. "That night, you told the nurse bit by bit what Avani liked and didn't like. I heard it all. I also know that you were originally planning to propose to me. You brought a car full of flowers, and there was a ring among the flowers, but you don't know that actually, long before you proposed to me, long before you went to see Avani, I was already planning to propose to you. That jewelry box, you clearly touched it. Why did you pretend not to know? It's not that I didn't give you a chance, nor that I would get angry just because you made a mistake once. I did give you a chance. It's just that you didn't want it." Damari dropped his hands in despair. "Is there no possibility of going back to the past?" he asked me. "You've already fallen in love with someone else. What's the point of going back to the past?" I asked him. "Are you trying to disgust me or yourself?" My parents came to add water several times, shaking their heads eager to know what we were talking about. Until it started to rain outside. Normally, as the host, I should be polite and ask the guests to stay. But I just couldn't bring myself to say those words, until I heard a familiar shout in the sound of the heavy rain. "Damari," it was Avani. She had followed Damari here. Damari, sometimes I actually feel sorry for you, I said to him. Being pestered like this, how are you going to live the rest of your life? This was the only time that I expressed my satisfaction. Damari gave me a deep look. He opened a large black umbrella and walked out of the yard. Avani was standing outside the yard. When she saw Damari coming with the black umbrella, she rushed under Damari's umbrella. Damari moved aside a little. Then the two of them disappeared into the rain under the umbrella. Later, Damari and I met a couple of times. It was about the company's affairs. The company was founded by us together. Damari and I had contributed the most, so we held quite a number of shares. Before, when we were together, although the shares weren't all in his hands, he could be said to have absolute control over the company. But after I broke up with him, everything was different. My initial idea was to sell my shares to Damari. For this reason, before going to the company, I specifically made an appointment to meet Damari in a coffee shop. During that time, he tried to make small talk several times. President Damari, if we don't talk about business soon, I'll leave, I said to him with a smile. Damari was very eager to buy the shares in my hands. But when Damari and I were discussing things, Avani suddenly rushed in. When she saw me, she lost her cool and picked up the coffee at hand and threw it at my face. Paula, why are you always lingering around? She asked me. Of course, I didn't get splashed by the coffee. Damari blocked in front of me. He wiped his face and asked me softly, Paula, are you okay? I'm fine, I smiled and casually picked up the bag beside me. Since President Damari's girlfriend is here, I'll take my leave now. Paula. Damari wanted to stop me but Avani stopped him. She shouted, Damari, do you want to betray me? Before walking out of the door, I vaguely heard Damari say, I've already let Paula down. In the end, the matter of transferring the shares to Damari didn't work out. I sold the shares in my hands to another shareholder. It was raining heavily on the day when the contract was signed, but I had to catch the high-speed train. Damari chased me all the way to downstairs of the company holding a plaid umbrella wanting to see me off. Sorry, I apologized to him. But you'd better not get too close to me in the future. Don't we even have this bit of friendship left? I turned around and left, leaving Damari standing there lonely. Later, I also heard from my junior schoolmates about Damari a few times. They said that Avani was always by his side, that he didn't want to be with Avani but couldn't get rid of her. He would hate Avani but also feel soft-hearted towards her. Don't you feel soft-hearted towards him? My junior schoolmate asked me. How could I? I said that I'm just happy for them. Both Avani and Damari have got what they wanted. The end.